At first glance, Avengers Endgame seems to have a relatively happy ending. Thanos was defeated, the actions of the snap have been reversed, and a ton of heroes have been brought back from the dust. Sure, we lost Iron Man and Black Widow along the way, but it was all for a greater cause. Or was it? Instead of going back to the moment before the snap and preventing it from happening, our Avengers reversed the actions of the snap 5 years in the future. While the snap may have taken just a second and dealt some major damage to Hulk's arm, there are some major implications and impacts which could make the whole thing even worse than when Thanos did it in the first place. Don't believe us? Well, let's go on a journey beyond the story of our heroes to dive deep into the implications of returning half of all life into the universe. Who can forget the montage of happy moments during the final moments of Endgame? Scott Lang sits with a resurrected Hope and his daughter, who's now 5 years older. And then there's the shot of Peter Parker. After traveling through space and turning to dust for 5 years, he seemingly returns to his normal high school life, meeting up with Ned like nothing happened. While these moments may seem cheerful, happy, and optimistic, the reality of reversing the snap 5 years after the original comes with some major consequences. As shown when Hulk reversed the snap back, we see life return in the form of a tree and some birds, confirming that the snap eliminated more than just humans. It wiped out half of all living things. In reality, the snap would have wiped out even more than half of these people. Just think about how quickly people turn to dust. And what if one of those victims was a bus driver? Boom! Crash. Non-dusted passengers could be dead and gone. Same thing goes for airplane pilots, train conductors, pretty much anywhere else with heavy traffic. While we were busy mourning Peter Parker's fears and cries for help on the planet Titan, all of the citizens' lives on Earth were dramatically changed. And for those who did survive, they most likely entered panic mode. During Endgame, we saw Hawkeye watch his family disappear on an isolated farm. While Hawkeye definitely felt anguish for his personal loss, things would be much different in more crowded areas like cities or suburbs. Riots would begin, grocery stores would get raided, malls would get looted. People would start finding abandoned homes and moving into them. And the basic structure of our governments would be broken down to their core. Let's start with the basics. Police forces are cut in half. Government leaders could be wiped away. The United States Senate consists of 100 members. Cut that in half and you don't have the ability to properly run a government. And this doesn't just apply to the United States, it's literally every country around the globe. Communications would be messed up, infrastructure would be in chaos, the world as we know it would be completely different. Thankfully, some of our heroes stayed around to help monitor things, and we got a glimpse of this through the hologram meeting Black Widow held at the Avengers headquarters. We can just imagine Bruce Banner in the Hulkbuster costume monitoring the streets to help stop looting, rioting, and any other forms of chaos before transforming into his Professor Hulk look. During the initial weeks and months following the decimation, the initial shock from losing half of all living things would slowly become the world's accepted reality. Panic and fear would turn into logic and survival. The world would have to rebuild and stabilize with only half the resources and half the population to guide everyone through it. While the future may seem bleak, there is still some hope despite so many people gone from the world. Things would be tough, power struggles would definitely ensue. But at the end of the day, people would ultimately choose to live their best life possible instead of giving up hope. And just as the survivors settle into the new world, here come the Avengers looking to reverse the actions and be the ultimate heroes. But thanks to the MCU time travel rules and many explanations from Hulk himself, the actions cannot be reversed from the point of entry. They must be reversed 5 years after the decimation, and this is where things get extremely messy. One of the best moments in Avengers Endgame was seeing all of our heroes come back and join the fight against Thanos. But just imagine what the rest of the world was going through. First, let's focus on the 5-year gap and how that impacts personal lives. Scott Lang was super accepting of his older daughter Cassie, but many families are going through the same thing. Older siblings who got dusted would now be technically younger than any siblings who survived and were within 5 years of their age. Couples would get split up, some would stay single, some would date again, and some would move on pretty quickly and get remarried. When their second half did return, things would get complicated pretty quickly. Would marriage licenses still apply? We imagine there are millions of death certificates that would need to get reversed. And that's just the adults. Let's focus on the babies for a second. Thanos' actions had some major implications when it came to babies. It probably would have been too devastating to see, but we all know some babies turn to dust while just laying in their crib. And for the ones who did survive, they may have been abandoned without any parents left to take care of them. So within the 5 years, these babies are placed into some form of foster care, many of them probably adopted or getting raised by other family members. 5 years go by, and much like Tony Stark's daughter, the only existence they know is the one following the snap. So the actions get reversed, and suddenly we have a plethora of parents looking for their missing children. Are these now 5-year-olds going to immediately go back to their eager parents? How does this work for adoption, parental rights, and more? And let's just think about this for a moment. The moment when Hulk snapped and everything came back to reality. It's safe to assume that once the snap reversed, everything returned to the same exact place it once was. We can't imagine an African elephant getting resurrected in the middle of Times Square, although that would make a great scene in Jumanji. So if the snap resurrects everything where it once was, there would be some major issues, including a lot of death and destruction. After the Thanos snap first occurred, we imagined society would be at a standstill for a while, but eventually things would come back to normal. And the normal we're referring to in this case is real estate transactions, people relocating, houses being built, and the natural changes in the land of the world. So flash forward to Hulk's snap reversal and everyone who will reappear. All of a sudden, people show up in homes that are no longer theirs. Visualize this. You're sitting in your new living room when all of a sudden a pine tree bursts through the ground and a black bear is raging in your kitchen. Obviously, Endgame had a central focus on the heroes and getting them to return, but outside of the Avengers' inner circle, things would be pure chaos and panic for a long time. And now with billions of people back on Earth, there's another huge issue to consider and something the Avengers couldn't help with: the world's food supply. After the Thanos snap, the whole food industry was likely thrown for a loop. Natural food and crops were cut in half. Fishing boats lost captains. Manufacturing plants lost workers and the means to get the food properly delivered to locations. Not to mention the mass panic which probably resulted in the hoarding of food and cutoff of resources worldwide. And to think, Fat Thor was busy playing Fortnite while normal citizens were fighting over a loaf of bread. The state of food panic probably didn't last long though. New methods were probably established, trade picked up again, and much like Pepper Potts, people probably learned how to garden and grow their own food resources. By the end of the 5 years, things were probably stabilized. Once the population doubled again, the food crisis was probably made even worse than the first time the snap took place. Now resources would be even more limited. Sure, the cow population would double and butchers would be happy, but there would be major problems with the immediate need for food and water supplies. And once again, panic would set in, riots would begin, and the power struggles to maintain a proper food supply would be bigger than ever. And speaking of power struggles, the snap reversal will bring some major problems to political offices and employment in general. In the United States alone, we would have a new presidential election whether the one serving got dusted or not. The roles of those who were dusted would have been filled, and now we would have 2 people assuming they could take positions. Basically, there would be a worldwide power struggle. Civil wars could easily start and be far more deadly than the one helmed by Captain America and Iron Man. With laws changed and everyday life completely different for 5 years, it would be hard to return society back to normal. And a lot of those problems could occur in just the United States alone. Start factoring in other countries, and you have a worldwide crisis on our hands. There would be a major job crisis, and for the Avengers, getting an everyday job probably wasn't ever a concern. We're talking about teachers, cashiers, police officers, and even regular office jobs. Even something as simple as Peter Parker returning to high school would come with complications. What grade does he enter? Are the survivors separated from the ones who returned? Not only does reversing create all of these logistic problems, but you can layer on plenty of psychological problems to make things even more complicated. There are those like Thor, who went through survivor's guilt and let themselves go. Then there are those who come back and have to deal with adjusting to the whole new society and way of life. Plus, what exactly was it like being turned to dust for all those years? We can imagine a whole lot of PTSD going around, only adding to the problem. And both sides of the snap will have to adjust to the new world. The changed ages of friends and family, the changes in society, and accepting the 5 years of life lost. Hopefully, this new version of Professor Hulk has a degree in therapy as well. So while Endgame ended with a hopeful future for a lot of our heroes, the whole world has some dramatic changes we would love to see play out on the big screen. Yes, Thanos has been defeated, and our heroes have happily returned. But did the surviving Avengers make the right decision? Should they have done more to prepare the world for the return of billions of people? If the public was warned, maybe some steps could have been taken to prepare for the sudden arrival and major changes which have occurred. And one final question. Even though half of the population was brought back, how many more lives will be lost because of it? Wow, it's almost overwhelming to think of the future in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How do you think people will cope with the changes? What other aspects would be a mess? Do you think it's worse now that things are reversed? Let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to ScreenRant for more videos on the Marvel Universe and so much more.